At 52, Catherine Winters sat at the edge of her bed in an apartment she had rented sight unseen, watching shadows lengthen across unfamiliar walls. The silence here was different from the silence of her old house. That silence had been thick with accusation and avoidance, with all the things neither she nor Marcus had been willing to say until it was far too late. This silence was clean, almost surgical. It belonged to no one, which meant it could belong to her. Outside, the city hummed with evening traffic. Car horns, distant music, the rhythmic clatter of a streetcar on its rails. She had lived in suburbs for 28 years, places where lawns were mowed on Saturdays and neighbors waved from driveways. This was different. This was deliberate anonymity, a place where no one knew her name or her story, where she could walk into a coffee shop and be just another woman ordering tea. On the nightstand sat a single photograph in a silver frame. Her daughter Lily at 16, laughing in a garden somewhere, sunlight caught in her hair. Catherine had brought almost nothing with her when she left, a few boxes of clothes, some books, kitchen essentials, this photograph. Everything else, the furniture, the wedding china, the accumulated debris of 3 decades, she had left behind. Marcus could do with it what he wanted. She no longer cared. The divorce had been quick in legal terms, slow in every other way. 9 months of lawyers and mediators and dividing assets like they were splitting a restaurant bill. Who gets the couch? Who keeps the blender? As if any of it mattered. As if objects could compensate for the architecture of a life that had quietly collapsed, while both of them were too polite or too cowardly to notice. Marcus had not cheated. That might have been easier to process, a clear villain, a dramatic rupture. Instead, he had simply stopped seeing her. Not literally, but in the way that mattered. Somewhere around year 15, Catherine had become part of the landscape of his life, functional, necessary, invisible. And she in turn had learned to ask for less and less until she was asking for nothing at all. The end came on an ordinary Tuesday. They were eating dinner, pasta with marinara sauce, a salad, a bottle of wine neither of them particularly enjoyed. Marcus was scrolling through his phone. Catherine was pretending not to notice. And then, as if observing herself from a great distance, she heard her own voice say, "I don't think I want to do this anymore." Marcus looked up, confused. "Do what?" "This," she said, gesturing vaguely at the table, at him, at the room. "Pretend we're still married in any real sense." He had stared at her for a long time. Then he set down his fork and said, "Okay." That was it. No fight, no tears, no desperate attempt to salvage what remained. Just okay. And somehow that hurt more than anything else could have. Catherine stood now and walked to the window. Below, people moved along the sidewalk with purpose, going somewhere, coming from somewhere. She envied them their direction. For the first time in her adult life, she had no role to perform. Not wife, not hostess, not mediator. Lily was 24 now, living in another city, building her own life. Catherine was proud of her, fiercely so, but she also understood that her daughter no longer needed her in the old way. The truth no one tells you about motherhood is that if you do it right, you make yourself obsolete. So here she was, 52 years old, alone, unmoored, terrified. The apartment was small, a one-bedroom on the 4th floor of a building that had seen better decades. The floors creaked. The radiator clanged at odd hours. The kitchen was barely large enough to turn around in. But the light was good, especially in the mornings when it poured through the east-facing windows and turned everything soft and gold. Catherine had chosen it for that light. It felt like a sign, though of what she could not say. She had taken a job at a non-profit downtown, administrative work, nothing glamorous, but it paid enough and it got her out of the apartment. Her co-workers were kind in a distant, professional way. They asked polite questions. How are you settling in? Do you like the neighborhood? And Catherine gave polite answers. No one asked about her marriage. No one asked why a woman her age was starting over. She was grateful for that. But the evenings were hard. The long stretch of hours between leaving work and going to bed, hours she used to fill with cooking elaborate meals no one appreciated, folding laundry, answering emails, managing the household machinery that kept a family running. Now there was no machinery. There was only time, vast and shapeless. She tried to fill it. She joined a gym and went twice before the sight of her own body in the mirror, older, softer, unfamiliar, made her want to cry. She signed up for a pottery class and quit after the instructor, a cheerful woman in her 30s, kept talking about centering yourself, as if Catherine had any idea where her center was anymore. She bought books she did not read. She cooked meals for one and ate them standing at the counter. One Saturday in October, restless and aching, Catherine walked without destination. She moved through neighborhoods she did not know, past brick row houses and corner markets, past parks where children played and dogs chased balls. She walked until her feet hurt and the sky began to darken. And then, on a narrow street lined with bare trees, she saw it. A small theater, old and slightly shabby, with a marquee that read, Community Acting Workshop, Beginners Welcome, Tuesdays 7 p.m. Catherine stopped. She had not thought about acting in more than 30 years. In college, she had been part of a theater group, nothing serious, just a collection of students who liked being on stage, who liked the permission to become someone else for a few hours. She had loved it, the rehearsals, the nerves, the strange intimacy of a cast working toward something together. Then she graduated, met Marcus, got married, had Lily, and real life, as people called it, crowded out everything else. She stood in front of the theater for a long time. The reasonable part of her brain supplied a dozen reasons not to go inside. You're too old. You have no talent. You'll embarrass yourself. This is silly. But another part, quieter, more insistent, said, what do you have to lose? The following Tuesday, Catherine walked into the theater at 6:55 p.m. The lobby smelled like old carpet and dust. A bulletin board near the door was covered with flyers for other classes, yoga, painting, salsa dancing. A handwritten sign with an arrow pointed toward the main space. Inside, a small group had gathered on the stage, maybe a dozen people of various ages. A woman in her 60s with silver hair and dramatic scarves. A young man, college-aged, with nervous energy. A middle-aged couple holding hands. Others. The instructor, a tall black man with a warm smile and a booming voice, introduced himself as Jerome. Welcome, he said. This is a space for exploration, for play, for finding parts of yourself you may have forgotten. No judgment here, no wrong answers, just presence. They began with exercises, breathing, movement, silly games that made Catherine feel self-conscious and then surprisingly made her laugh. They paired off and mirrored each other's movements. They walked across the stage as different characters, a queen, a thief, a child. They improvised scenes, two strangers meeting at a bus stop, a family argument, a confession. Catherine was terrible at first, stiff, overthinking, unable to let go, but Jerome was patient. Don't perform, he said. Just be. Trust the moment. By the end of the 2 hours, Catherine was sweating and exhilarated in a way she had not felt in years. Her body ached, but it was a good ache, the ache of use. She went back the next week, and the week after that. Slowly, something began to shift. In the theater, Catherine was not a divorcee or a middle-aged woman starting over. She was just Catherine, present, trying, failing, trying again. The group became familiar. She learned their names, their quirks. The silver-haired woman, Diane, was a retired librarian with a wicked sense of humor. The young man, Trevor, was studying engineering but dreamed of writing plays. The couple, Paul and Sonia, had been married 40 years and were taking the class to reconnect. One evening in November, Jerome assigned them a solo exercise. Bring in a monologue, he said. Something that speaks to you, something true. Catherine panicked. She had no idea what to choose. She spent days searching online, reading through plays, looking for something that fit. Nothing felt right. Everything felt like a costume she was trying on, something that belonged to someone else. Then late one night, unable to sleep, she opened her laptop and began to write. Not a monologue from a play, but her own words. She wrote about the morning she realized her marriage was over. She wrote about packing boxes and leaving her house. She wrote about sitting alone in a new apartment and not recognizing her own life. She wrote about fear and shame and the strange, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, it was not too late to become someone she could recognize. The next Tuesday, hands shaking, she stood on the stage and read what she had written. Her voice cracked. She stumbled over words, but she kept going. And when she finished, the room was silent. Then Jerome smiled. That, he said quietly, was true. Diane hugged her afterward. Trevor told her she was braver than she knew. Catherine cried in the bathroom and then laughed at herself for crying. Something had broken open. Winter settled over the city. The days grew short and cold. Catherine's apartment was drafty, and she took to wearing sweaters indoors, thick socks, wrapping herself in blankets while she read or watched the street below. The holidays loomed, a minefield of expectations and memories. Lily invited her to spend Christmas in Boston, where she lived with her partner. Catherine almost said yes, but at the last moment she declined. She needed to prove to herself that she could be alone without it destroying her. Lily understood, or said she did. On Christmas Eve, Catherine walked through her neighborhood. Most of the shops were closed, their windows dark. But here and there, lights spilled from apartment windows, families gathered, laughter and music drifting into the cold air. She felt the old loneliness rise up, sharp and familiar. But she also felt something else, a kind of companionship with herself, a sense that she was not running from solitude but learning to inhabit it. She stopped at a small diner that was open, sat at the counter, and ordered coffee and pie. The waitress, an older woman with kind eyes, refilled her cup without asking. A man a few stools down nodded at her. "Merry Christmas," he said. "Merry Christmas," Catherine replied. It was enough. In January, Jerome announced that the group would be putting on a small production in the spring, a series of short scenes and monologues, nothing elaborate, just a chance to share their work. Catherine's first instinct was to say no. The idea of performing in front of an audience, even a small one, terrified her. But the others were excited, and their enthusiasm was contagious. She agreed. Rehearsals intensified. They met twice a week now, working on timing, on voice, on presence. Catherine chose to perform the monologue she had written, the one about her divorce. Jerome helped her shape it, cutting unnecessary words, finding the emotional core. "Don't explain," he told her. "Just let us see you." It was harder than she expected. Every rehearsal felt like peeling back skin, but it was also liberating. She was naming what had happened to her. She was refusing to let it remain silent and shameful. One evening after rehearsal, Diane invited Catherine for a drink. They went to a quiet bar nearby, sat in a corner booth, and ordered wine. Diane asked the question no one else had. "Why did your marriage end?" Catherine considered lying, offering some sanitized version. But she was tired of pretending. "I disappeared," she said. "Not all at once. Slowly. I spent so many years trying to be what I thought I was supposed to be, a good wife, a good mother, that I forgot to be a person. And by the time I realized it, I didn't know how to come back." Diane nodded. "I did the same thing," she said. "Different circumstances, same erasure. It's what we were taught, wasn't it? That our value was in service. That wanting something for ourselves was selfish." "Do you regret it?" Catherine asked. Diane smiled sadly. "I regret the time it took me to stop, but I don't regret stopping." They sat in silence for a while, two women on the other side of invisible wars. Spring came slowly, reluctantly. The city thawed. Trees budded. Light lingered longer in the evenings. Catherine noticed small things, the way shadows moved across her apartment walls, the smell of rain on pavement, the sound of her own footsteps on the sidewalk. She was learning to be alone without being lonely, or at least without being only lonely. The performance was scheduled for a Friday night in late April. The theater was small, maybe 80 seats, and Catherine did not expect many people to come. But Lily surprised her, driving down from Boston with her partner. A few of Catherine's co-workers showed up, and the rest of the seats filled with friends and family of the other performers, strangers who had come to bear witness. Backstage, Catherine's heart hammered. Her hands were cold. She felt sick. Diane squeezed her shoulder. "You've got this," she said. When her turn came, Catherine walked onto the stage. Lights were bright. She could not see the audience, only shapes in the darkness. For a moment she forgot everything, her lines, her name, why she was standing there. Panic rose. Then she took a breath. She thought of Jerome's words, "Just be, trust the moment." And she began. She spoke about the quiet ending of her marriage. She spoke about packing boxes and leaving. She spoke about fear and starting over and the terrifying freedom of not knowing who you are supposed to be. Her voice shook, but she did not stop. She let the audience see her, really see her, in all her uncertainty and grief and stubborn, fragile hope. When she finished, there was a beat of silence, then applause, warm and sustained. Catherine stood on the stage, blinking back tears, and felt something she had not felt in years. Not pride exactly, but presence. She had shown up for herself. She had not hidden. Afterward, Lily hugged her tightly. "Mom," she said, "that was incredible." Catherine laughed, still shaking. I was terrified. I know, Lily said. That's what made it incredible. They went out for a late dinner, Catherine, Lily, and Lily's partner, to a small Italian place with checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles. They ate pasta and drank too much wine and talked about everything and nothing. Lily asked about the acting class, about Catherine's job, about her life. And for the first time, Catherine had answers that felt true. As they were leaving, Lily stopped her on the sidewalk. I'm proud of you, she said. I know this year has been hard, but you're doing it. You're actually doing it. Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. Doing what? Living, Lily said simply. That night, alone in her apartment, Catherine sat by the window and looked out at the city. Lights glowed in 1,000 windows. People were living their lives, messy, complicated, beautiful lives. And she was one of them now. Not watching from the sidelines, not waiting for permission, not shrinking herself to fit someone else's expectations, just living. She thought about the woman she had been a year ago, sitting in a house that no longer felt like hers, afraid to leave, afraid to stay, afraid of everything. She thought about all the years she had spent making herself smaller, quieter, less. And she thought about the woman she was becoming, uncertain, imperfect, but undeniably present. It was not a dramatic transformation. There was no single moment of revelation, no epiphany that made everything clear. It was quieter than that. It was a series of small choices to show up, to try, to let herself be seen. It was learning that heartbreak does not have to be an ending. It can also be a doorway. Catherine did not know what would come next. She did not have a plan, a roadmap, a guarantee. But for the first time in a very long time, she was not afraid of that uncertainty. She was curious about it. She was open to it. She was 52 years old. She was alone. And she was, against all odds, all right. The acting class continued through the summer. Jerome introduced new exercises, new challenges. They worked on scenes from classic plays, experimented with improvisation, pushed each other to take risks. Catherine found herself looking forward to Tuesdays with an eagerness that surprised her. It was not just the acting, though she loved that. It was the sense of belonging to something, of being part of a community that valued honesty and vulnerability. In June, Diane suggested they start meeting outside of class, just a few of them, to read plays together. They began gathering at a cafe on Sunday afternoons, Catherine, Diane, Trevor, and Paul. They took turns choosing plays, reading roles aloud, discussing themes and characters. It was informal, unstructured, joyful. Catherine realized she had not had friendships like this in years, friendships based on shared passion rather than proximity or obligation. One Sunday, after they finished reading a Chekhov play, Trevor looked at Catherine and said, "You should write more. That monologue you did, it was really good. You have a voice." Catherine laughed, embarrassed. "I'm not a writer." "Why not?" Diane asked. Catherine opened her mouth to answer and realized she had no good reason. Only old habits, old fears, old certainties about who she was and was not allowed to be. That night, she opened her laptop and began to write. Not with any goal or plan, just to see what would come. She wrote about her marriage, about the slow erosion of self, about the moment she chose to leave. She wrote about the terror of starting over, about her first weeks in the apartment, about the acting class. She wrote for hours, barely aware of time passing. When she finally stopped, it was past midnight. She read what she had written, surprised by its honesty, its rawness. It was not polished, it was not perfect, but it was true. She kept writing. Most mornings before work, she sat at a small kitchen table with coffee and her laptop and wrote. Some days the words came easily. Other days she stared at the screen, frustrated, convinced she had nothing to say. But she kept showing up. She kept trying. By August, she had finished a short memoir, 60 pages about her divorce and its aftermath. She had no idea what to do with it. She showed it to Diane, nervous, half expecting to be told it was self-indulgent or poorly written. But Diane read it in one sitting and then looked at Catherine with tears in her eyes. "This matters," Diane said. "You need to share this." Catherine submitted it to a small literary magazine that published personal essays. She did not expect to hear back. But 6 weeks later, she received an email. They wanted to publish it. When the essay appeared online, Catherine was terrified. She had exposed herself, her failures, her pain. What if people judged her? What if Marcus saw it? What if Lily was embarrassed? but the response was overwhelming. Women, mostly, reached out to her. They sent messages saying, "This is my story too." They thanked her for putting words to what they had felt, but could not name. They told her she was brave. Catherine did not feel brave. She felt raw and exposed, but she also felt seen in a way that mattered. Her story, her specific, messy, imperfect story had resonated. It had made someone else feel less alone. And that, she realized, was enough. Autumn came again, a full year since she had left her marriage. The city turned gold and red. The air grew crisp. Catherine walked through her neighborhood and noticed how familiar it had become. The corner bakery where she bought bread on Saturdays, the park where she sometimes sat with a book, the theater where she had found her voice again. She was not the same woman who had arrived here a year ago, terrified and unmoored. She was still uncertain about many things. She still had moments of loneliness, of doubt, of wondering if she had made a terrible mistake. But she also had moments of deep, quiet contentment. Moments when she sat in her apartment with tea and a book and felt completely at peace. Moments when she laughed with friends and realized she was happy. She had learned that starting over at 50 was not about becoming someone new. It was about becoming herself again, the self she had abandoned years ago in the name of practicality and duty, and all the small compromises that seemed reasonable at the time, but added up to a life she no longer recognized. She had learned that heartbreak, as devastating as it was, could also be a gift. It had forced her to confront the ways she had betrayed herself. It had given her permission to stop performing, to stop shrinking, to stop waiting for someone else to give her life meaning. She had learned that she was stronger than she thought, not in a dramatic, heroic way, but in the quiet, persistent way of showing up each day and choosing to keep going. One evening in late October, Catherine received a message from Marcus. It was brief, awkward. He had seen her essay. He wanted her to know he was sorry for the ways he had failed her. He hoped she was doing well. Catherine read it twice. She felt a flicker of old anger, old hurt, but mostly she felt nothing, or not nothing, but something close to peace. She wrote back, equally brief. She thanked him for reaching out. She told him she was doing well. She meant it. That night, she sat by her window and watched the city lights flicker on one by one. Somewhere out there, people were falling in love. People were falling apart. People were starting over, ending things, holding on, letting go. Life in all its messy, complicated glory. Catherine was part of it now, not watching from the margins, not waiting for permission, not making herself small, just living fully, imperfectly, bravely. She was 52 years old. She was alone, and she was, at long last, free.